You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 biggest stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live pretty much every Thursday, so subscribe on YouTube at IN Magazine to get a notification. Anna, not going live on Thursday this week because of the impending snowtacular or whatever's coming.
Superstorm, yeah.
Superstorm. There's a cell headed this way, Jeff. It is a wave of snow.
I feel like this one might be real.
This one's
I think they blow a lot of these out of proportion. I think this one might be really nasty, actually.
Okay.
By the time you hear this,
Yeah,
you'll know if I was
taking it.
right or not. But
Right.
Jeff's
I
taking
don't
it
know.
seriously.
You'll have like the huge flannel hat on and be covered in ice trying to shovel your driveway.
I got a snowblower
Oh, okay. Then it'll be me.
and a wife and a couple kids. I'll just be inside. It'll be fine.
Well, please a reminder to subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine. Thank you, everyone that did that this week. We really appreciate it. We also have only one more episode to go before our 100th episode, which again won't be next week because of the holiday. We're going to be off. It'll be the first week in January. You guys pumped about that 100th episode?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
You seem
Jeff is
pumped.
Trying to
ecstatic.
control how excited I am.
I think you were still like mid-dream about your kids and wife shoveling your driveway while you had just drinking whiskey.
We all know it's not going to happen. That's why I can joke about it.
Anna, one more to go.
That's this one, right? This is the one more?
I mean, yes, this is like the last one.
Okay.
But then there's that one.
Let's make it a good one, guys.
We're already off to a hot start. Before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor.
There are a number of factors impacting the performance of our national electric grid, ranging from uncontrollable and extreme natural occurrences like floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, to shifting user dynamics like renewable energy and electric vehicles. And as the grid ages, the risks associated with human error and equipment failures are also increasing. Parallel to improving grid resilience is a focus on a cleaner power, with goals to limit greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality. For more information, go to enchantedrock.com or download some of the company's additional information assets listed on this page.
And we're back. Our first story this week, U.S. Air Force receives first of 100 new bomb disposal robots. Last Thursday, L3 Harris Technologies delivered the first 4 of more than 100 T-7 explosive ordnance disposal robots to the U.S. Air Force. In September 2021, the Air Force ordered 56 T-7s in an $85 million 10-year contract. In May 2022, the Air Force ordered another 51 of these T-7s. The T-7 represents a major upgrade for the Air Force's 20-year-old robotic fleet. The system allows operators to handle larger explosive devices in less time with better speed, lift, reach strength, and battery life. It also has a unique haptic controller that provides human-like dexterity and mission-critical precision. L3 Harris has already delivered 122 T-7 robots to the UK Ministry of Defense. Between that contract and the one with the Air Force, L3 Harris is one of the largest military robot suppliers. Jeff, all of these improvements seem great, but when you're replacing a 20-year-old robotic fleet, maybe you don't have to go that far to be an improvement.
Well, I think more than just an improvement of this technology, it really is sort of a convergence of a number of different trends going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at the sort of the modern face of warfare, things are changing. There's a lot more urban situations where these robots are going to become more important. There's more terrorist activity, again, where you're going to rely on this type of military application. And obviously there's a growing movement towards soldier welfare, which is always a good thing when you can put a robot out there in harm's way instead of a highly trained soldier. So all of those things are kind of going on. I think one of the key things that I took away from this too, and in looking at this particular robot, it's become especially popular because it's pretty simple to employ. The user interface, it seems like it's very straightforward. So you don't need a ton of up training to get these things on the ground and out there and moving, which has not always been the case when the military has introduced new technology. So I think that's another positive sort of trend. One thing too that we've seen over the last 10 years is military spending on robotics has enhanced dramatically, almost doubled in the last 10 years. And it continues to see those types of increases. We already mentioned a lot of that comes from increased focus on soldier welfare and getting them out of harm's way. The other part of that is need. Yeah. There's some significant recruiting issues right now throughout the armed forces. This last calendar year, the Army missed its goal by I think like 25%.
Oh, wow.
The Navy hit it. The Air Force hit it. The Marine Corps was also down. Okay. We've also seen all these branches of the armed forces really rely on retention strategies. The main retention strategy, money. So it's expensive. Yeah. So you're not getting the same number of people in place that you were in the past. Robotics is going to continue to play a bigger role, positively in terms of soldier welfare, but also because it's a necessity. Another story I saw sort of related to this, and it touched me on a sort of a personal level, is they're starting to integrate more of these lifting robotics and these cranes and arms into field artillery. I can remember humping these 100-pound high explosive shells off the truck, onto the ground, into the howitzer. I mean, there's not only a lot of work, there's also a lot of opportunities for to get hurt.
Oh,
just dropping. I mean, again, it's a 100-pound shell. So a lot of those things, if you can put a robot in there, obviously it's going to be quicker, which is obviously always a benefit, and also greater safety precautions.
Anna, we see a lot of robotics going into manufacturing facilities because there is the labor shortage. Some of the numbers that Jeff was talking about, I can't believe, would you say the Army's down 25% or missed their goal by 25%?
Missed the recruiting goal by 25% this year.
Yeah, Marines are also down. I have to think that automation and robotics could help fill that gap at least a little bit.
Definitely. Jeff really nailed it on the head there. I think the recruiting issue is one of the biggest facing the military right now. In June, each branch was reporting that they were envisioning that they would miss that goal, right? At the time, they said they were experiencing a record low percentage of young Americans that were eligible to serve and an even tinier fraction willing to consider it. And the consideration challenges were coming from people who use the word welfare. I think that's very important. People who are looking at their mental health and concerned that they would not do well after coming out of, say, a combat situation, which is really scary to think about. And then there was another entire group of people that they either obesity or, other physical issues that didn't make them qualified. I read a quote at the time from retired Lieutenant General Thomas Spohr of the Heritage Foundation, who said that it was the start of a long drought, and that 2022 is the year we question the sustainability of the all-volunteer force.
Oh, no.
Those are pretty chilling words, I think, to be taken seriously. But, your point, investing and proliferating these types of technologies that make that decision a little bit easier or more appealing to people who think, the military is going to protect me when I'm out there. The Air Force also announced some plans in February outside of this specific technology that we're covering, the T-7, that they're going to field reconditioned armored vehicles equipped with lasers to detonate unexploded ordnances on airfields. So that's called RADBO. RADBO, Recovery of Airbase Denied by Ordnance.
The military has done worse.
Yeah,
with acronyms. That's not bad.
That's short.
That's not bad.
It says it has a robotic arm to investigate runway craters for unexploded ordnance. And they said that it's actually the disposal by detonation is actually the safest and easiest way to get rid of these explosive threats. So that's another way that they're doing that. But I think to see this stuff repeatedly in the media helps kind of reinforce that is what's going on behind the scenes, and that this doesn't necessarily need to be, something that you fear as much as I think people maybe do.
Well, L3 Harris is having a big year. On December 18th, just this week, the company announced a deal to buy Aerojet Rocketdyne for $4.7 billion. which is going to give it access to new markets and technologies, including hypersonics and space exploration. Aerojet also has major contracts with the DoD, NASA, and other allies. Also this year, in October, L3 Harris bought Viasat's Tactical Data Links, or TDL, product line for $1.96 billion, which secures voice and data communications between warfighters. I thought those were two interesting acquisitions from L3 Harris to make it a significantly larger company. It's now going to have more than 50,000 employees.
Wow.
Yeah, and it looks like L3 Harris is making a move to be a much more dominant player when it comes to DoD contracts.
Well, in all those issues, you're looking at things that are, again, removing soldiers from being close to the line of fire. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. All right. Our next most popular story this week: Air Force grounds entire B-2 fleet after emergency landing. On December 10th, a bomber experienced an in-flight malfunction that forced it to make an emergency landing at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Then, it caught fire. The fire was put out, no one was injured, but the Air Force has grounded its entire fleet of B-2 stealth bombers. The U.S. has fewer than 20 stealth bombers in the entire fleet, and the aircraft, along with the B-52 Stratofortress, is the air leg of the nation's nuclear triad. During the stand down, the entire fleet will be inspected. The B-2 stealth bomber's first flight was in 1989, but as we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, it's slated to be replaced by the B-21 Raider. Anna, it looks like that B-21 needs to get here as soon as possible.
I mean, yes, it's of course significant, the situation, when you consider the role that these aircraft play. You mentioned the nuclear triad. I think right now, American military capability shows strength in the face of some nuclear threats that are occurring in Russia. Not necessarily something that, are going to be used, but they need to be there. So, the Pentagon's press secretary and Brigadier General Pat Ryder attempted to reassure the public earlier this week after this story broke. He told reporters that the grounding does not make the U.S. vulnerable in any way, and that the Pentagon still has a variety of capabilities at its disposal, particularly when it comes to this specific application, the strategic bomber fleet. And you mentioned the B-52s. He called those actually, quote, a redundant capability, and said he's confident that we can continue to maintain that capability, that we need to deter adversaries and, if necessary, quote, engage in conduct. Again, I'm not sure if this needs to be said as clearly at a different time, but right now I think people are feeling a little bit, I don't know. Vulnerable. I mean, every day you hear the word nuclear being bandied about. So with that global conflict taking place, it's just kind of a concerning time to consider that there could be any gaps in capabilities. That said, I think Brigadier General Ryder makes a good point when he also stressed that there's always going to be times, whether the air, land, sea vehicles, where equipment needs to be taken out of service temporarily. I mean, that's already happening. That's why we have the redundancies. Mm-hmm. So let's not forget that, it's never really a good time to provoke the U.S. military, because we have so much more at our disposal than anybody else. So to me, I don't know if I'd necessarily lose sleep over this, because that it's not like Vladimir Putin is looking at this and saying, okay, now is my time. Yeah, I mean, he knows what we have. He knows what we're capable of. I don't think that anyone is going to take it lightly to just sort of venture into a gap here. But
I think it was important that he came out and said something.
Oh, totally.
Just because before he had made a statement. There were a lot of comments on the website, people that were basically saying, "Why would you publish this?"
Yeah,
Jeff. One of the parts of the story that made me understand that maybe we weren't at such a security risk was when the second paragraph was about all the bowl games that now are going to have to adjust to a different aircraft. Because
the biggest impact, right?
Yeah, because the B-2 was grounded.
I think from a strategic perspective, the one concern would be that these types of headlines could potentially embolden an adversary. No one has ever accused Vladimir Putin of being a clear-thinking and patient individual.
Very true.
When you see these types of things, maybe that would be something that could give him a false sense of confidence, or some other enemy, not just him. But again, I think it was covered very well in terms of what this really means and all of that. one of the things that first came to my mind, again, we've done so much coverage on the Raider coming out as a replacement to this. When you look at cost has always been a huge issue with that new fleet of bombers. You know, they're projecting somewhere around 750 million per. They wanted 100 of them.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pretty big price tag to throw out there. So when you're looking at maintenance dollars potentially that needed to be allocated towards the current fleet, you could see maybe the priorities got to skew here.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at these B2s, it was tough to find a maintenance dollar. It's not like going and getting an oil change, you know, where they've just got a flat rate on what it costs to maintain a B2 bomber.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the various sources, you get between, if you average them out, maybe like 85 grand per hour it's in the air just to maintain one of them. Okay. Per flight hour. Wow. So expensive.
Yeah, so those bowl games got to be paying a lot.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then you're also looking at roughly 60 maintenance hours per hour flown. So there is a ton of upkeep and effort and work that needs to go into keeping such a sophisticated machine, even if it is 30 years old, running smoothly. Okay, there's still a lot involved. So you could see some of the priorities potentially getting out of whack there and focusing on the new and not the old. Seems like they're doing the right things in terms of pulling it down, popping the hood, making sure everything's good, and getting things back in working order. And I have a feeling that a lot of this was already in place before any press release came out. Yeah. So for anybody who may have concerns about, hey, we're down for a week, nah.
Yeah, I don't think something like this comes out.
Right.
If it's not okay.
Yeah.
Our next most popular story this week, Smucker's goes after alleged Uncrustables imposter.
That headline.
The J.M. Smucker Company recently sent a cease and desist letter to Gallant Tiger, a small Minnesota company that allegedly infringed upon the Uncrustables trademark. The not-so-valiant jungle cat was targeted for copying Smucker's round, crustless PB&J design. Gallant is not trying to compete with Uncrustables. The company's lawyer pointed out that there are limited available shapes in which to make sandwiches. Earlier this year, CEO Mark Smucker said that Uncrustables will be a $1 billion brand for his company. The company makes 4 million Uncrustables a day and recently opened an R&D facility to support the brand. Anna, I never imagined there would be so much to unpack with an Uncrustables IP infringement case. But first of all, Gallant has got a point here. There are just not a lot of shapes for sandwiches.
I know. There's not a lot of places to go with that. I feel like I've infringed upon this patent, to be honest with you. If Smucker's claims around the circle shape are deemed grounds for moving forward with this, which is currently a cease and desist, as you said, but obviously that could easily get more serious. And Smucker's has gone further in the past trying to defend this patent. Then I think maybe we need to start looking at patent law in the U.S. To me, this story was incredibly frustrating to read. First of all, the person who's being accused of knocking off the product, I think has some great defenses. The contents are entirely different. They're marketed differently. They're distributed differently. They're in a different price bracket. So if all that is there in the groundwork, this circle shape matter, if that supersedes all of the rest, then to me, this is getting completely out of hand. I mean, I 100% agree that we have to approach this with common sense. How many shapes are there for a sandwich? How else can you show the contents of that item without removing a piece of bread on the packaging? Smucker's, as I mentioned, has been aggressively defending its ownership of the crimped peanut butter and jelly sandwich for many years. And it's not new that people have viewed this particular product and its related patents as kind of making a mockery of patent law. There's been a lot of legal articles that have been written about Smucker's and how they have pursued this. And the arguments that seem to come up every time are about how it might just be too easy to get a patent, and maybe it's too difficult to invalidate one, or that it stifles competition. And you can kind of see those points when you look at this, that it maybe stifles competition. I don't know if I want to live in a world where there's only one option for a round peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Wow. Gross.
Jeff?
I'll wait my turn.
I think you should.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
I don't know. I think that there's significant differences between these two products, and that's very clear. One product is vegan. It's high protein. It doesn't use the preservatives. It has some very unique and interesting ingredients, none of which Uncrustables currently offers. So I don't know how they can have a lock on that entire prospective side of the market. I don't think that that's fair. It's not enough to me. I think if Gallant Tiger can survive this, honestly, they're getting a really great amount of publicity out of this.
Yeah.
So, maybe they'll get that out of it unless Smucker's throws down legally and just drives them completely out of business, which, again, stifles competition.
Yeah. Well, Seth, who's listening to us live, watching us live. Hi, Seth. How's the family? He says, now it's time to change to a hexagon.
Seth, they're talking about it being round, and in a lot of cases that Smucker's has gone after, they talk about the lattice work,
the fluted edges.
Yeah, that pieces the two together. Mm-hmm. So
there's your problem, Seth.
There's where
the fluted edges.
You have to be careful. So if you've ever used one of those for, say, like sealing ravioli or something, you might want to throw it away because you could get yourself in some big trouble there if you apply that to a sandwich.
Jesse also says, pro tip, put the Uncrustable in the air fryer. Never tried that, but I'm gonna. Jeff.
You will not.
Well, no, because
there's fruit in it.
There's jelly in it.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Wait, you don't eat jelly?
No, I don't eat jelly. It's an abomination.
For God's sakes.
Jeff, this reminded me of something that some boutique bar would offer as part of their midnight menu. It's a sophisticated Uncrustable, and I understand Smucker going after it, but it still doesn't make any sense to me. But all that said, when you look at it, man, it certainly looks like an Uncrustable.
That's my thing. I'm looking at the picture on gizmodo.com, and when they put the two packages next to each other, I get where Uncrustables, I get where Smucker's coming from.
What?
Because the bite. They take a bite out of it.
It's
because
round.
Because the bite?
It's not just round. It's the presentation. Now, I would agree that the products are different.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the ingredients, the way they're positioned, but the packaging and promotion, I do get where they're coming from. And if I'm Smucker's and I've got $1 billion brand of PBJ, I'm going to defend it too. I'm going to be a little bit of a bully if I can to protect that. So I get where they're coming from. I'm not saying I'm going to endorse the tactic. I'm saying I get where they come from. Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, David, great. What was your line there about the Gallant Tiger?
The not so valiant jungle cat.
Yes, that is fantastic. Well done. I think for them, what this really comes to, because when you're looking at the shape, okay, now we're making jokes about, well, it could be any shape here, okay? You can make a sandwich or whatever you want to call it, whatever shape possible.
Yeah. What
this really comes down to them is it cheaper to battle this legally or to go through like a line changeover and put something in the production process that makes it square instead of round? We've already talked about pennies on the dollar in terms of profit margins on food products. It is tight. So I'm sure Gallant Tiger is looking at that. What are the costs in terms of changing? Again, if you made this a square, it's not going to impact anything. And all of this goes away. So what hill do you want to die on? Change the shape? Or do you want to go through all of this legal battle, whether it's justified or not, to make this go away? I think that's where really what you have to balance if you're in their case, because Smucker's will draw this out as long as they need to. Mm-hmm. They're going to protect $1 billion brand. Okay. If you're Gallant Tiger, if you got a case, I guess stick to it. But otherwise, I'd just look at making it a different shape so this goes away.
So, but Jeff, do you think like someone should be able to copyright like a round pizza or something, like, or a square pizza? Like, I mean, there's so many products out there that are very similar to each other. This is the food market, like think of all of the private label products and the generics and the not like. I don't agree that, and maybe the issue I'm taking is more with the legal system and not with this particular case. But I just don't think that that's tenable for a market if you want to have multiple options for consumers.
I think in this case, you do have to be careful because it's part of the marketing presentation. Again, when I look at this label, they look like the same thing.
And see, I disagree with you that those two boxes are so different. I don't understand.
But it looks like the same product.
It doesn't, though.
But which one of these, if you've had one of these, you've probably had the Smucker's brand, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're going into the frozen section, you got two kids yanking on you, you're in a hurry and you're going to grab one, I think it's not unreasonable that you'd be thinking you're grabbing an Uncrustable and you're grabbing a Galleon Tiger.
I mean, that's a bit of a reach.
It is unreasonable.
Just because, yeah, I mean, I think that you would know you're grabbing, having been in that situation very frequently, I would know when I'm grabbing the wrong thing, mostly because the kids would say, no, the yellow box Eggo, not the generic one, because those, although the same, are gross. I don't understand. I mean, to Anna's point, I think the biggest part also is that they've trademarked or they have the patent around the shape. I mean, it's not, I don't think anyone has the trademark or patent over a round pizza or a square pizza.
But if that's part of the presentation, if that is it's like a logo.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you can.
Well,
I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying I think they have grounds to stand on here.
Okay. Hopefully you have more Annas than Jeff in the jury box. Smucker says that Gallant Tiger's PB&J with round fluted edges and package design that show a sandwich with a bite taken out of it are identical to Uncrustables and create, quote, a likelihood of consumer confusion. And I see both your points. Gallant Tiger was launched in October. New company. They want to be the Ben & Jerry's of crustless round sandwiches, which is less processed food and odd flavors. And odd flavors is something we should really talk about here because a Smucker's Uncrustable is simple peanut butter and grape jelly. These flavors are peanut butter and chai spiced peanut or pear butter or blueberry jam spiked with bourbon and sage. There's also an apple chili jelly and almond butter. And I tell you what, if you're buying for kids, you do not make that mistake. You do not make that mistake. They're also far more expensive, as Anna said. They're about $5 each compared to an Uncrustable, which is $1 or less per item. Gallant called Smucker's here the bully. And some experts and Anna, they criticize the U.S. patent system as being too willing to grant patents for commonplace ideas, like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't know. It's Jesse who's watching us wants to know, what about cereal and other food products? There are Cheerios called Tostios that are the exact same. Where do we draw the line? I think that's the biggest issue here, Jesse, is that in this very specific example of making a peanut butter and jelly, the trademark office drew a line or the patent office drew a line, whereas in other places it did not.
Well, and I would wager as well, those are products that have been around for 50, 60 years. Uncrustables, I seen when my kids were little, these were kind of a new thing. Okay. So they've been around for less amount of time. I don't know if trademarks have an expiration on, just like patents do. They could time out. I'm not sure if that's the same dynamic here. But again, they were the first one to come out with this type of product.
Yeah. When you guys both saw your first Uncrustable, did you think $1 billion idea?
I thought that my kids will like these, and they do not.
Yeah, mine didn't either. They didn't. No.
Everyone was talking about them being a revolution, and I bit into it, and I'm like, that is a pass for me. It's just, I didn't get it. But, I was never into, what's the other, Lunchables. Never into that, too.
Boo.
I get 3 crackers and 3 pieces of cheese in here. Pass. I'm bringing a sleeve. All right. Our next most popular story this week. Plastics industry head says bill would, quote, destroy an American industry. On December 1st, Congress introduced the Protecting Communities from Plastics Act to address plastic production and alleviate its effects on the environment. Matt Seaholm, president and CEO of Plastics Industry Association, a trade association representing the plastics industry, wasn't happy about it. He said the legislation takes the industry in the wrong direction and will destroy an American industry. Seaholm testified at a Senate hearing on December 15th, defending plastic use and its impacts. He talked about the plastic fibers and airbags, plastic packaging for nutritional devices or nutritional services in food deserts, plastic water bottles delivered during hurricanes, and pre-sterilized plastic milk collection bags for breast milk storage during the baby formula shortage. Seaholm says plastic is the preferred material in applications because it uses the least resources to make and transport. While he acknowledges that U.S. recycling rates are too low, he says the problem is that recycling infrastructure hasn't kept pace with the industry. But he doesn't just have problems, but solutions. He suggested an increase in critical recycling infrastructure investment, promotion to increase demand for recycled materials, and encouraging innovations to ensure materials that cannot economically be recovered through traditional methods can still be recycled. Jeff, what were your thoughts on Seaholm's testimony and whether or not his suggestions sound nice in principle, but maybe not in practice?
I think the problem with this is you've got a piece of legislation that went at this subject from one extreme, and then you had a response from an industry leader who went from the other extreme, when the reality is the answer's, as usual, in the middle. Okay. So just looking at the U.S. Congress website here, when it just sort of summarizes what this bill is about, it says it sets forth requirements and incentives to reduce the production of a variety of products and materials, including plastics, and increase efforts to collect, recycle, or compost products and materials. So what it's saying is we need less of this stuff, and then we also need to recycle. What did he just say? We need to figure out a way to recycle this stuff. That's what we need. The problem
before
is
that, he said, "You're going to burn it all down."
I understand that. I'm trying to focus on the common ground.
Oh, gotcha.
Relax. Okay. Just, you okay?
Yeah.
You all right?
Yeah, I really wanted to lean into that one.
I can tell.
Felt good.
Well done.
Thanks.
So
Shouldn't
the
burn
common ground.
plastic.
What?
Sorry. Go ahead.
The common ground is finding a way to recycle this stuff. Plastic is not the issue per se, okay? It's figuring out a right way to dispose of the plastics that we're using. The other part of this, and again, where he goes into an extreme mode here, is if you read between the lines, they're really talking, the majority of what they're talking about is three products: water bottles, plastic silverware, and plastic bags. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the answer is in all of these cases. Plastic water bottles is a huge one because whatever stats you want to look at, there's billions made every year and only about 7% of them are actually recycled. Okay. That's an issue. That's a huge issue. Plastic silverware, I think there are ways to work around that. Same thing with plastic bags. I think we can do more paper bags. I'm on board with that. Okay. So there's different options here, but when you start attacking these things from two extreme perspectives, as opposed to working towards the common ground, you're not going to get anywhere. That's what's frustrating here. And the other thing is when they talk a lot about this single-use plastic, you have to be careful. A lot of things that he brings out there aren't applicable because this bill does not pertain to medical use,
right?
PPE and some other types of things. So not exactly apples to apples, but again, it's because perspective is skewed. Look at the common ground and go from there. What this kind of reminds me of too is we've done some stories talking about the use of cooking oils being used to power jets. Do you know why we don't do more of that? We have no infrastructure in place for collecting all the cooking oils from all these fast food places. Somebody's going to come along with $1 billion way to do that, and then we can start using all of this oil that we normally dump out or do whatever with to fly, to power jets and other pieces of equipment. So again, work from the middle, find a way to recycle these plastics and handle them the waste stream better than we are now. That's what the bill should be focused on. That's what this individual from the Plastics Association should be also focused on, not trying to combat things from the extreme perspectives.
Longtime listener John Dearden says plastics save a ton on fuel, even compared to paper for transport. Biodegradable plastic is the way to go. Anna, with this story, I like that it started with Seaholm coming out and attacking the hyperbole in the bill with extreme hyperbole himself.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Jeff that, of course, it's a false choice to suggest that the sole solution is either completely reduce plastic waste or focus on solutions around recyclability and reuse. That obviously, we need to be doing both of those things. It's notable that he did pinpoint all these very noble and important uses for plastic. He definitely declined to mention all the ways in which it's being used almost egregiously. Like if you think about going to the grocery store and how difficult it would be to buy a product that doesn't have a plastic package, lid, liner, wrap. I mean, think about that. That's like an apple if you don't put it in a bag. I mean, there's almost nothing. And that's because there are other options out there, but they have not been scaled or they're too new. And I know that you said that you don't believe plastic is the problem per se. And I agree with that a little, but there are some problems with plastic, and what's his name? Seaholm.
Yeah. Matt Seaholm.
When he talks here, he puts all the onus on both the government and the recycling industry, and none of it on the plastic industry. And of course, you can't rely on the CEO of Plastics Association to give you the most balanced insight into what can be done here to reduce the use of plastic. But this is a problem that's going to get worse with plastic. It's just going to continue to pile up. It's not biodegradable. I agree that recycling is important, but I think we've learned a lot over the years. And fixing recycling as a problem is just as challenging to solve, if not more, than reducing plastic use. And absent in his rant, I think, was anything about the composition of plastic. And this is to John's point, biodegradable plastic, that's not being produced very well right now and effectively. Like, there's thousands of types of plastic that are being produced right now. They degrade really quickly. They're very hard to recycle. The more you reuse them, the more toxic they become. So I don't know that this is a problem necessarily that can be solved by recycling. I think, I read this interesting investigation that NPR did a couple years back. They ran this report about how industry officials in the plastics industry had misled the public about the recyclability of plastic, even though they knew as early as the 1970s and 80s that plastic could not be economically recycled. They know about this. There's stuff that they should be doing, with their formulations to play a role in the solution here, and not just say recycling has to figure it out. The government has to figure it out. We're just going to be here waiting for that to occur. And I think for consumers, we'll let him pass the buck downstream because it's easier for us to bury our heads in the sand and not deal with the problem, because it's a huge, huge problem.
Well, in other industries, like the automotive industry, we see automakers take the lead in terms of finding a solution to the problem. And I think that it's somewhat on the plastics industry to help be a part of the solution as well, not just identify problems. Beyond Plastics, President Judith Enck, who is also at the same December 18th hearing, during her testimony, she said that the U.S. needs to cut plastic production by 50% in the next 10 years. Seaholm denied the goal's probability, saying that such a move would cripple the country's supply chains and economic progress, which I think is overblown as well. My point with this entire thing is that innovation happens and still can happen quickly when your hand is forced. Just look at the European Union. When it banned single-use plastics in July 2021, there were innovations in paper, and many realized that similar challenges were going to happen in the United States. We've seen industrial Q-tip makers that were all made with single-use plastics completely change to paper. And they started offering that in the United States. Why? Because they know the same problems with single-use plastics are coming. So there are some makers out there that got ahead of it and are part of the solution. And then there are others that are part of the problem and continue to push back. And I understand he's the head of the industry association.
But I don't think it's that simple. If you make that kind of mandate to cut 50%, what was the timeline there? 50% of all plastics? That is also going to take out a lot of the good stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have to be careful when you're putting those types of mandates in place without incentives or programs to help support plastic manufacturers as well. You can't strip out one of the ways that they make money and then ask them to also reinvest in innovation and product development. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not fair either.
No. Mm-hmm.
So to take some of those steps, there also needs to be ways to not just incentivize the consumers, which is basically what that bill proposed, saying, hey, David, if you bring back your plastic silverware to the restaurant, we're going to give you a gift card or something. Okay. Yeah. No. That doesn't work. You need to help. I agree. A lot of those plastics are a problem. So work with the manufacturers to reduce the production of those plastics and replace them with higher grade stuff. Understanding the consumer is going to get part of the bill for this. Mm-hmm. You're going to see, your takeout meal costing 50 cents or $1 more because you've got a plastic spoon that can actually be recycled. Mm-hmm. Okay. The ice cream you get, it's going to be more because, again, whatever they're giving you to eat it with can be recycled. It's a higher grade plastic as opposed to the cheaper stuff that we rely on now. I'm with all of that. But again, you can't just say, hey guys, knock it off. And we're going to make you knock it off, because that doesn't work.
No, that was not anyone officially saying that. That was just another industry representative from the other side, from Beyond Plastics, saying that should be the goal. The Protecting Communities bill makes transitioning away from plastics a priority. The bill would direct the EPA to create federal targets for plastic source reduction and reuse for all single-use plastic packaging and food service ware in the country by December 31, 2027. So when you look at the actual bill, I think there are some very realistic targets here. It would set a minimum 25% source reduction target and a reuse and refill target of at least 30% by 2032. Again, I think these are all realistic according to the bill. And once we get done with the, hyperbole, we can actually start coming up with some real solutions.
But again, if you're going to force manufacturers to stop doing something that's been a paradigm for how long, you also need to put something in place to help them absorb some of the loss that they're going to realize.
Or manufacturers can be the first mover and as a result, establish market share because they were the first to market.
Come on, man. For a plastic fork?
I mean, we saw it with swabs, man. Cotton swabs, one of the biggest commodity items that you would think when it comes to cleaning in the industrial sector. And they became a market leader because they did it. Like, I mean, you can take the the biggest commodity item and make that switch, and that's their differentiator. So I get it. I get how it's easy to say, come on, that's not realistic. But for some companies, it's happened.
I think those were very specialized applications. This is a lot different when you're looking at the consumer market.
Okay. We shall see. And now for a giant exploding fish tank. Our most popular story this week. U.S. company to send team to look into Berlin Aquarium Rupture.
Aquarium, I think it's pronounced.
Aquarium. No, that's how they call it in Berlin. Reynolds Polymer Technology is a U.S. company that helped build a massive 260,000-gallon aquarium in Berlin. The Aquadome opened in December 2003 and was modernized in 2020. Reynolds Polymer says that 41 of its acrylic panels were used to make the tank cylinder. At about 6 a.m. last Friday, 2 people were slightly injured when the aquarium collapsed in spectacular fashion. The company, which made and installed the cylinder component in the Aquadome tank 20 years ago, is sending a team now to investigate this catastrophic rupture that sent a wave of debris, water, and about 1,500 tropical fish crashing through the hotel lobby and out onto the street outside. The company says it's too early to figure out what caused the failure, but a top local official says, quote, first indications point to material fatigue. Police have found no evidence of foul play, which, I thought the exploding gum, Mission Impossible, obviously. Nearly all of the 1,500 fish that were inside at the time of the rupture did die. However, a few at the bottom of the tank were saved. And one of the things I was most surprised about with this story was that it was pointed to likely material fatigue, and yet this 20-year-old fish tank was modernized in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these pictures, man. Like, did you see the aerial view? These photos. It looks like this lobby was just completely destroyed. It's so hard to understand how only 2 people were slightly injured in this because even it was prior to 6 a.m. So obviously the lobby was probably pretty empty. Luckily,
yeah.
But could you imagine, if it was 5-something at night?
Like check-in time?
Yeah, like there's a bar, a restaurant underneath. Like, it would have been a completely different story that we're talking about now. So very fortunate that it was, I hate to say just tropical fish because it was sad also, but, could have been worse.
Sad for you. Seth says, fire up the grill.
Gross.
So
Seth.
We each have different responses.
So this was the world's largest freestanding aquarium, making it entirely unique. And so obviously with a one-of-a-kind structure, it's so hard to know what kind of one-of-a-kind problems could have occurred in this case. And forgive me, I don't know a lot about fish tanks or the world's largest fish tanks. But, you mentioned that they're looking at the possible cause of material fatigue. So these were acrylic panels. From what I've read, acrylic is a very common material to use in these very large aquariums. It's lighter than glass. It's easier to drill. It's easier to repair. It doesn't scratch. So it allows designers to be really creative with the shape, which is something that they can't do well with glass. One thing that acrylic doesn't have going for it is that it is slightly porous, but it looks like long-term exposure to water and even salt water has not typically caused acrylic to like warp or swell. So you kind of wonder if maybe there was some degradation at the joints. Where Reynolds, this company, Reynolds Polymer that you referred to, they are sending the team out. They have been in this business for a really long time. They've done successful installations in thousands of other places. They said they handled the project in 2002, although it's not clear to me if they also did the 2020 modernization.
Yeah, that was unclear.
So one of the things I did find interesting is I looked at Reynolds' website. So they have their own like bonding process. They're very specific about how this acrylic functions. They have very specific care instructions on their website to the point where they identify certain products and sprays and formulas that if they're used actually void the entire warranty of those panels.
Oh boy.
So I don't think we could eliminate the possibility that potentially it had something to do with someone not being trained properly and how to care for, the maintenance and the ongoing day-to-day. Maybe some sort of chemical was used on it that wasn't supposed to be used. I don't know. Again, I don't know anything about a giant fish tank, but I think a lot of people are watching this to try to understand like what happened here, because these are the same kind of tanks, the same kind of materials that you see in aquariums where I'm sure walked through them.
Under?
They're like over your head. They're, like to imagine like a shark come flying out at you while you're in the museum with your kids. Like no one wants this to happen again, right? So will be interesting to see what they come up with here.
Well, in that particular case, I think the shark is going to be just as scared as you are.
You don't think he's going to just be like biting?
Yeah, like the
mouth
buffet
open,
line. My tank just exploded, but here comes the free lunch.
Children.
Jeff, to Anna's point, Reynolds Polymer, looking at their website, they have incredible experience with installations in zoos, aquariums, and throughout the world. I mean, if you're someone that needs to know right away, that's Reynolds Polymer, because they need to figure out what happened and how to make sure it's prevented in many other places going forward.
Whenever I see these types of situations, my first thought is, you want to figure out what happened, obviously, and Anna definitely went into all that. Do you replace this? Like, once you figure it out,
No.
I mean, do you want to put another one up? If you're Reynolds, like, are you saying we have to try to do this again someplace else? Or is this just abandoning for what for them is basically another product type?
You mean for Reynolds to do again, or for like the hotel to put back up?
Anybody, anywhere.
Oh, no, this is a major product category for Reynolds, so they need to figure it out.
I'm not talking about the acrylic itself.
No,
I'm talking about this type
aquarium
of structure.
Yeah.
Like rise from the ashes and rebuild it. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that they have so many of these unique structures throughout the world that I think they need to figure it out. And I mean, it would be a shame for all of a sudden these to not be a thing anymore.
Okay, if you're this hotel,
yeah, you put some sort of sculpture up there, man. Maybe you don't.
But if you're the next hotel,
yeah,
wouldn't you have huge reservations about doing this type of thing?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't even 20 years old.
But that's my point.
Yeah.
So something like this happens, and even if you understand everything that went wrong,
yeah.
At what point are you still like, no,
never going to happen
I'm not doing
again?
this again? And at what point does that sort of stifle any innovation, not for fish tanks, but for this material? Because who knows what other applications are out there for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I think, and again, that's why it is very important for them to find out what happened there to figure it out. I always think it's interesting too, the fact that this was in place for 15 plus years. They do a refurbishment in 2.5 years. I just think about how tough of a time I always have when I tear stuff apart to get it to go back together exactly as it was. It can work, but it's not precise. And when you're talking about tons of water and fish life, man, scary.
Maybe not this hotel, but hotels always want to have the next big attraction to bring somebody in. So I think that if Reynolds, let's say they find out it's a material failure, if they can create a peace of mind, someone's always going to want to have the biggest and best of something. And this was, for a long time, the Guinness Book of World Records named it the largest cylindrical aquarium in the world. That's something you could market as an attraction.
Well, that's what they were doing, obviously. And having the elevator go right through the middle of it, I mean, it's interesting. I just think that'd be a tough one to do again.
Yikes.
Reynolds did come out and offer the gratitude to the workers and first responders who were able to save some of the fish.
Well, to echo Jesse's sentiment, who's watching us, maybe they'll use that space to put up a memoriam to the fish that so gallantly lost their lives.
Maybe.
Gave their lives.
Reach. I don't know if you guys noticed, but when they were cleaning up the debris, it looked like the last thing they were picking up were the fish.
Oh.
It was, that was another thing that I'm glad it doesn't exist because that means nobody was there to take it, but there was no footage of this happening. I'm sure the hotel has some sort of closed circuit footage.
Yeah.
But I was really surprised that didn't wind up on the internet somewhere. You had mentioned, Jeff, that hotel visitors, ride a crystal clear elevator through the core of this 52-foot tall cylindrical aquarium. And so the restaurant is actually on the top of the aquarium. So could you imagine if you were eating and then it went from beautiful aquarium underneath you to just you put down the bread and look down, you're like, oh, there's nothing there anymore. Nothing. Just a real mess going on. They had... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say. Also, can you order fish when you're in that restaurant and just eating it while you're looking at the tropical fish? Just sort of rude, don't you think?
I believe that's probably what they specialize in. This is one of the top tropical fish restaurants in the world.
Yeah.
You guys only do sushi? Makes sense. Well, they're gonna have a lot of new specials this week. So. The aquarium also has 2 full-time scuba divers that are responsible for the daily care and cleaning of the fish, coral, and the acrylic panels.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So they were thankfully not in there.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Quick breach. John says maybe for the tropical fish, the temp is much higher. Oh, and the heat equals expansion.
That was one of the theories, that there was some temperature issues there.
Okay. Well, before we get started with In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our sponsor.
There are a number of factors impacting the performance of our national electric grid, ranging from uncontrollable and extreme natural occurrences like floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, to shifting user dynamics like renewable energy and electric vehicles. And as the grid ages, the risks associated with human error and equipment failures are also increasing. Parallel to improving grid resilience is a focus on a cleaner power, with goals to limit greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality. For more information, go to enchantedrock.com or download some of the company's additional information assets listed on this page.
And we're back with In Case You Missed It, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what was your In Case You Missed It this week?
Mine is about Forever Chemicals. And since Jeff and I have been sparring quite a bit today, I'm just curious to see if Jeff comes out as pro Forever Chemicals after this. But I'm poised for that. So we learned this week that 3M is pledging to stop producing forever chemicals, or PFAS, which have been the subject of scrutiny for a long time because they've been linked to harmful health effects. They're widely used. They break down very slowly. They're found in the air, waterways, soil, humans, animals. 3M has been widely criticized as being a producer of PFAS for a very long time. They're facing a lot of pressures from investors, legal pressures, lawsuits potentially, cleanup costs. So the company announced this week that they would phase out production of PFAS by 2025. This is a business that's worth $1.3 billion annually for 3M. One investment expert that was cited by Reuters when this first came out said that she believes other chemical companies will follow 3M's lead. I think this is a good step forward for consumers, considering we could see some ripple effects here. DuPont has already said that they are limiting the use of PFAS to, quote, essential industrial applications, and they're working with customers to pursue alternatives. And I know there may be some sympathy for this company dumping a $1 billion plus, business unit, but I honestly feel like we can't continue to let businesses freely produce things that create such harm to the environment and to people. And I think we will continue to see companies kind of bow to the pressure of investors and the threat of litigation. And this will continue to impact oil and gas, obviously, chemicals, plastics, as we discussed, where the end in certain cases maybe doesn't justify the means. And I think that's appropriate. I also think it's fair to mention that outside of all these external pressures weighing on DuPont's business unit, there are market factors as well. The Pentagon announced in October that in January it will unveil specifications for PFAS-free firefighting foam. And by next October, all new foam the military buys must meet those specs. A year later, the Defense Department will cease all PFAS-based foam use. So once the military makes a switch, it's expected to create sort of a tidal wave of change. According to Bloomberg Law, this product is on its way out, I think, and 3M knows it. And they're a huge supplier of the chemicals for that. So better for the world overall. They've known about this problem for years, and it's well past time, in my opinion, to stop adding more of these to the environment.
Yeah. 10 years too late. I mean,
more than that.
Good on 3M for doing something finally.
Yeah.
But people have known this is bad for humans for way too long.
Yep.
And I mean, I apologize if I have no sympathy for any of the companies that are going to lose business as a result for this poison that's in our water everywhere. I mean, we have sorry, it's
no, I agree with you.
We have friends that are part of the Wisconsin Bureau of, I can't remember what, like land and water. And he goes around and just samples water all around Wisconsin, right? And so I asked him, hey, how bad is the PFAS problem in Wisconsin? And he just said, as a species, we're going to have to evolve to it because it's already everywhere.
It's too late.
And it's too late. So, I mean, if the water guy says it's too late, it's great PR, 3M, but we're already poisoned.
Well, it's not just great PR, though. It has to be done, right?
Yeah.
So, to me, I think I'm not saying put 3M on a pedestal and give them a blue ribbon. And that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying this is good that
they've finally stopped with the poison.
They have to stop.
They stopped dumping the barrels of taxidermy.
Step. It's a first step. Okay?
It is a first step, but it's a first step at more than a decade too late.
Agree.
Okay, so should they have not done it?
No, they just should have before. But I mean, no, good job. Happy to do
Nobody's saying that.
No one said good job. Yeah. No one said good job.
We're just saying it's I agree. It's a first step.
And
it's something.
And if other companies are going to feel pressured to follow suit here, and not just in this application, but in others where the results are harmful to the environment and to people, then yes, that stuff needs to continue to happen. So when it happens, good. I'm glad.
I think one of the interesting things too you brought up there was pressure from stockholders. I think that's really going to play a big role, especially with these larger companies, in terms of getting them to really change their attitudes towards this type of production or these types of issues. So thought that's interesting. And yeah, look, it's not solving the entire issue, but it's a positive first step, David.
It is a positive first step. Good job.
No one said good job.
Oh, sorry.
You keep saying good job.
You're the one looking for the participation trophy here, David.
Jesse says the room is heated today. And Jesse, it is heated.
It's so hot in here, Jesse.
Physically heated.
Yeah.
And then also, I don't know.
Emotionally heated as well.
We're getting aggressive.
We're going to need today in manufacturing tank tops and shorts. Just hi.
It is 0 degrees outside and we are sweating.
Yeah, I can't wait to go make a snow angel. Well, differences of opinion aside, Jeff, what?
They are not different.
They're not a different opinion.
Actually, yeah, no, we all agree variously.
David, you just need to be more of a glass half full kind of guy.
I typically am. You know what? You know that I'm typically the glass half full guy, but and we'll see the good in almost any situation or what people are trying to do, but some things I won't.
That word, I think
that
it's a trigger word for you, and it just made you mad hearing about it, right? Right? I mean,
no, I would say I'm what? Which
you can be deathly cynical at times, though. You go dark faster than anybody I know, other than Andy Zoll.
That's true. That's true. Andy's got me on that one. No, I would say I'm an eternal optimist in most things. But for those few things I'm not, you're right. Race to the bottom. In case you missed it this week.
It is not about plastic.
Oh, God.
I picked out an article talking about the U.S. blacklisting 36 more Chinese companies. The U.S. Department of Commerce is adding 36 Chinese high-tech companies, including makers of aviation equipment, chemicals, and computer chips, to an export controls blacklist, citing concerns over national security, U.S. interests, and human rights. The inclusion of the companies in the trade entity list means that export licenses will likely be denied for any U.S. company trying to do business with them. Pick this out not because it's new, but because it was more explicit in its explanation. Yeah. And I think it was very clear that these companies were added primarily, and they can talk about the human rights issues. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. That's not what's driving this. Yeah. This is a national defense issue. And when it was brought up under the Trump administration initially, there was some backlash. There was definitely some thoughts that it was more about political posturing than anything else. And now we're seeing the Biden administration continuing on this road. Yeah. Because I think we're seeing a lot of these high-tech companies were basically getting the dollars to support things they were developing by working with U.S. manufacturers and consumer electronics and other things. So basically cutting that off right there, in the U.S.'s perspective, they're not going to give these companies the funds to develop military devices that could be used by China, potentially against us or anybody else. I think this is really all the stuff we've been talking about in terms of hypersonic technology is highlighted here. The fact there's also the fact that Biden wants more U.S.-based chip manufacturing. We've talked a ton about everything that's going on there. But I think, again, what caught my eye is there's no longer any, it's not behind the scenes. We're coming right out and being very blatant in terms of why we're doing these things. And China really doesn't have a good response because they would do the exact same thing. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to be an escalatingly tense situation between these two economic powers, especially when you throw in stuff with all the market conditions right now. Inflation's an issue. So when we look at consumer electronics devices and U.S. manufacturers potentially having fewer options from where they source materials from, how are consumers going to respond to that? Even though it's being positioned as the greater good from a national security perspective. As things escalate with Russia, and people, if China has, they're kind of on Russia's side a little bit.
A little, just a bit.
They don't want to come out and say it too loudly, but it's obvious. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes out and if it leads into other markets as well.
No, I agree with you that this was a topic that was overly politicized for too long. And that's why I agree. I like that they just came out in plain English so everyone can read it and go, oh, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Anna, your thoughts on the 36 more companies that were blacklisted?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does make sense. Though I think if the U.S. wants to start going after companies and blacklisting them over human rights violations, it's a big list.
Yeah, very true.
Jessie is just worried that they're going to take away her TikTok. And luckily that didn't make the list. But for all of humanity, hopefully it makes the list soon.
Oh,
I agree, David. I'm with you on this one.
I have never used TikTok. I
haven't either, but it just looks so annoying.
Recently somebody asked me, like, do you look at TikTok? And the way I looked at them, they're like, that's a no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I only look at it when you send it to me. But there are some notable ones out there. There's one where they did an update on E.T. and basically instead of making a bad sequel, they made it in about 2 minutes. It's the only good one out there. All right, mine, in case you missed it this week, is about Ford seeking a patent for remote control technology. Ford Authority reported that Ford recently filed a patent for a new system that would allow drivers to control their cars via smartphone. I know what you're thinking. Why? The application is interesting. Ford says that it wants a mobile app to make towing easier. See, that's how far I got too. And I was like, oh, because towing is terrible. I'm very bad at it. Backing up vehicles while towing a trailer or boat can be difficult and overwhelming for drivers. Also me. Just, I don't even get it.
Yeah, I'm terrible
at
that.
It's like you're supposed to go backwards to the right when you're going. Anyway, the system would allow drivers to exit their vehicle, see exactly where the trailer is going while backing up. I picked this story because you can be both the driver and that spotter in the back, where it's just like, no, left. You got to turn it. It's just, this is something that my dad would see me, trying to back up a car with a boat. And he would just say, just let me do it. Just let me do it. And then I'll just get my app out. Just be like, no. Gamification dad, what's up?
Yeah.
I'm putting this thing in the water and I'll still crash it into a tree. Did you guys have a chance to look at this story? Because I know that at first you're like, okay, remote control tech, what does that mean? Maybe calling your car or something to come and get you. But I thought this was a cool, just small application that's actually very reasonable and could be a differentiator for Ford.
Initially, I thought this was Ford trying to patent something. We debated the Uncrustables thing.
Oh.
What was the other one? The Model E, kind of stuff. I thought it was going down that route, more of a legal route than a technology route. But once I saw what they were looking to do, I'm with you. Yeah. I am terrible at trailers. I haven't had to back up with a boat in a while, but just like when we take stuff to the land, like the landfill and things like that, backing up with a trailer, I need to make sure there is no one around. Because I would end up on YouTube, somebody going, look at this guy.
Oh, yeah.
He does not know what he's doing.
Yeah.
Which they'd be right.
Only visit landfills where they have the full oval, where you come in on the scale, drop everything, and just come right back around.
So I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of this.
Anna, your thoughts on Ford's new tech?
Yeah, definitely. It's fewer people's vacations being ruined, which is great.
Or delayed.
Yeah. Well, and Jeff, I agree. It's like there's so much in auto tech, especially in the interior, starts to feel like a solution in search of a problem. They're just like almost over digitized in there at this point. This is an actual problem and causes damage to people's equipment. And so, yeah, I think that's a cool development and people will actually use that.
You know who's going to hate this? That guy. That guy who, as soon as you pull up to the dock, he's like, hey, you need some help? I got this. Yeah. I can do this for you. I'm like, let's just knock it off.
Oh, yeah.
Stop, guy.
Or the person that just was a natural at it. Like my brother who can just back up in any space and he'll be like, that's cheating.
Like I'll go with this one buddy. We'll be backing the boat in and it takes him a little bit because he doesn't do it every weekend, right? He's got it. He'll get there. Just takes him an extra heartbeat. And then you got that guy running down the road. Hey, I can do that for you so I can get my boat in. I got like 2 hours to be out here.
There's
douche.
Nothing but just a row of those guys at every launch on like a Saturday morning. Well, before we get out of here, let's move on to our final thoughts. Anna, what is your final thought this week?
I just wanted to give a shout out to our management team here. We had our holiday party over the weekend. Everyone had an awesome time. It was a very, very nice party. And they kind of pulled out all the stops for us. And just wanted to say thanks to Tom and Heidi and Rich for letting us do our thing. Even though it's ridiculous half the time. They don't really bat an eye at that. So
no, we did our thing.
I mean, and just in, the podcast in general, like we just get to come up here once a week and spitball and no one steps in and tells us what we can and cannot say, which is pretty cool. So
that is, I will second the thank you on the party. My final thought this week is that finally after weeks, McDonald's has responded.
They did?
They responded, yes. And they understood my concerns. They heeded my claims. They said they sent in a sanitation team, which I think means everybody died. The entire area was sanitized. But then for my troubles, instead of refunding my money, I received 2 free combo meals.
Whoa.
They didn't refund your money still?
Didn't refund my money, and I was contacted by somebody that was customer retention specialist who offered me a form letter and 2 coupons that I set on fire. But there was a nice hologram on there. Wow. Nice hologram because I'm sure those are counterfeited. But just trash. That's all I've got to say is that McDonald's remains trash and the customer retention did not work. I also wanted to say a thank you, not just for our Christmas party, but for all my friends and family that showed up for, I recently had a milestone birthday and we got after it. And so thank you to everybody that helped me get after it. And thank you very much to Carrie, my wife, for putting it together. It must have been a lot of work, both leading up to it and with me afterwards. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
So no, I have to say thank you too. Otherwise I'd sound really
to just anyone.
Just
yes.
Such the Jeff.
So grateful to everyone in this office for everything they do all year long.
Wow, Jeff.
Especially the 2 guys that you can't see on camera that we make fun of up here. They're pretty reasonable. Yep. So I can't top the McDonald's story still. That's kind of mind-blowing.
I was like, it was like a personal victory when I saw the letter arrive. I was just like, yes, they finally did it. I got my like $31.72 back. And no, I got like $8.99 in meals.
Boo.
Yes. All right. We'll go right into the polling question. The polling question was, what does U.S. manufacturing need the most for holidays? We had some good responses here. I want to go through some of these. So the first one I get to was Andy. He said, not Andy's all.
Oh.
This was Andy. He said, his response was less Elon Musk. He said Musk should keep on being Musk man, but should do so while just keeping his mouth shut, his fingers off the keyboard, and away from the camera. That is excellent advice, Andy. We would all agree with that. Clint said energy assets would be the biggest gift that he would give U.S. manufacturing. He said to support increases in manufacturing, reliable energy is essential. At the risk of offending your co-hosts, I believe he is speaking to you too.
What?
Solar and wind ain't going to cut it, especially if everybody's plugging in EVs. NIF-derived plants, the nuclear fission, which is what he's referring to there, won't happen in any of our lifetimes, so that leaves nuclear power as the only low CO2, high power density source. Thanks, Clint. Appreciate that. We also had Larry chime in. His response was workforce resources. He said, I think without a doubt, all the supply chain, delivery, and manufacturing problems could be solved with an available workforce and U.S. ingenuity. I thought this was a good one too from Tom. He said his response was workforce resources, but then he also allowed in long-term stability in the top four. He said any and all legislation needs to have some common sense thought put forth for both short-term and long-term consequences. Tom, you're going to get like 3 T-shirts from me because that's awesome. That's exactly agree with that.
The very controversial common sense.
Okay, but is it common sense to send someone 3 T-shirts of the same shirt?
We have
different shirts.
Take your own advice.
We have different shirts. We have different shirts we can provide.
Right.
Saving on postage.
And I wanted to end with Brian's response here. He said workforce resources, but then he also said high schools to push trades more than they do. And his comment was, seems like we have too many teachers and administrators pushing all kids to go to college. 4-year degree is not for everyone. We need to educate parents and students that a good living can be made in the trades. And if you learn a trade, you'll have a job for life. Preaching to the choir, Brian. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody. Comments, not just to this poll, but really as long as we've been doing them, the participation's been awesome. A lot of good stuff, and we're happy to send out those T-shirts. We're going to be taking a little bit of a break here, so I don't have another polling question for this one. But I think as Anna and David would also appreciate, we just want some thoughts on what to do for the big 100th episode.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to get a hold of any of us on your thoughts on what we could do, that'll be the podcast polling question for the next episode.
It has to be awesome.
I will say that it's coming back in high schools, that we've seen a lot of tech programs coming back and actually partners with many equipment manufacturers that are putting their equipment so that way they can have an established, trained employee coming out of high school. So I've been encouraged by that, but that's after like a 20-year lull.
Well, I think what we're seeing more of, and I'll go back to when we were down at the Rockwell Automation Fair with all the STEM stuff that was down there with the first robotics programs that were incredibly impressive, and talking to those kids. Manufacturers at a local level are being more proactive in reaching out to get involved. It's not as much about the students or the faculty or even the schools reaching out. We're seeing it the other way around, which is highly encouraging, which is fantastic. It really shows the strength of the industry and the fact that people aren't just waiting for something good to happen. They're going out and making it.
Okay. So the soft question is, what should we do for the 100th?
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. Everything's on the table. Everything.
Sure. Why not?
No.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. To email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters to make sure you get the podcast delivered to your inbox first. And make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine, working towards that next goal of hitting 9,000. Thank you all for subscribing there as well. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. And we'll see you for episode 100.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.